there is an errata on the website that's listed on there. In measure 13, the first C should be a C sharp, and the two C's afterwards are C natural, as I've indicated on the handout. Okay, and it is from the beginning to measure 23, and quarter note is from 92 to 104. The beginning of this piece starts off in E minor, so if you horn players rarely ever get to play in that key, high school, junior high stuff. So if your students aren't used to that, just pick any minor, any book that has an E minor scale over melodic minor, raise 6 and 7, because that is what they're going to see. So pick something that has C sharp and D sharp that they will see in this piece. E minor arpeggios as well. I would, with my students, the way I would approach this is giving the eighth note, the beat. Start somewhere around 80. You don't want to start off too fast. This is going to help them with the articulation. The biggest thing on this one is making sure they are slurring where they're supposed to slur and tonguing where they're supposed to tongue. Range-wise, it's in a good range. Rhythmically, there's nothing very hard about it, but it's the articulations. There's two main articulations: slur 3, tongue 1, or slur 2, tongue 2. And it's really, really easy to just do whatever you want. Okay, and there's some spots where one measure could be slur 3, tongue 1. A few measures later, it's the exact same line, the exact same measure, but it has a different articulation. So by slowing it down, they can really, really get a feel for what those articulations are and where they are. Okay, and gradually speed the tempo up little by little once they learn the etude that way. The staccato notes, I would recommend that they not be that short. There's a difference between playing band staccato. When we have a full band setting, we're always trying to make sure that they play nice and short. We always want to make sure that the entire ensemble plays with the same staccato, but that doesn't really translate too well to like a soloistic setting. Soloistic setting, they're going to be a little bit of detachment between the notes, but you don't want to make it as solid as you would say, a K march or a Susan march or anything like that. Okay, and so I'm going to play the first measure, just straight Do syllable. Okay, straight Do syllable. Now, by just changing it to a Ta syllable, you're going to get that short, you're going to get that detached sound that you want without having to really focus in on da 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 da. Because what's going to happen is the faster you speed it up, it's going to almost sound like a machine gun in some areas, and you kind of really don't want that type of sound. So we're just going to change it to a Ta syllable, and use that Ta syllable anytime you do have the 16 notes. You're going to get that detached, but you're not going to get the, which is it's not really that pleasant to hear. So you basically just want to use a Ta syllable for those staccatos. There's some measures that are a little bit tricky, and I'm going to give you a little way to approach them and maybe clean them up. Measures 2, 11, 16, 18, 19, and 21 have the same idea, where there's 3 notes that are slurred and 1 note that's tongued, and that 1 note that's tongued is kind of like a leap from the rest of the notes. Okay, a way to clean that up would be to just play the first and last note of each little four note grouping, where you have a dotted 8th, 16th note. We're going to make the first note a dotted 8th and play the last note of 16 as written. So you have that 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, a 1. The hardest thing about those measures is knowing where to go and where you're coming from. The little inner notes, that's the easy part. They're going to get that real easy. But it's jumping and being super accurate, going from note to note, is where they're going to have the issues. So a way to clean that up is just play the dotted 8th, 16 rhythm. This is measure 2. We'll do that one, measure 2. Do that over and over again until they get a good idea of where the first note is, the last note is, where they need to go on each beat. Make sure that there's hardly any space between the dotted 8th and 16th note. That way they can get used to blowing the air all the way through those 3 notes. Okay, you don't want to do this, because then they're not going to get used to blowing the air all the way through the whole beat. Okay, so you want to make sure that dotted 8th is nice and long. And once they get nice and clean, you can add the inside notes. And you can use that approach on all those measures. Like I said, 2, 11, 13, 16, 18, 19, 21. It's really, really helpful in measures 16 and 19. Those 2 measures are very similar to each other, but the beats change up a little bit, but it really helps out in those two measures. So definitely use that approach. If they're having difficulty in any of those measures, use that approach. It'll help out big time. One alternate fingering that can be used throughout this exercise is on the bottom line E, and that occurs in measures 7, 9, 16, 19, and 22. Whenever that E is preceded by an F sharp, if you use first and second valve for that E, it's going to help out with the technique. It's going to make the technique a little bit smoother for the students, because they're going to be able to stay on the same partial. Instead of going from F sharp to E and going to another partial, you can just stay on that same partial and use 1 and 2 for the E. It'll help out big time. Like measure 9. Because the note that usually comes after that E is also an F sharp, so it's just really easy to keep that second valve down. Just put the first valve down, bring it back up, as opposed to, I mean, it works either way. If they're having a little bit of difficulty with that, you could throw that in there. If they're not, then just leave it alone. That's one alternate you can use. One alternate that's also available that I did not put on the handout is actually at the end of measure 9. There's an E. The last two notes are E and F sharp. Some students do have difficulty going from E to F sharp, playing both of them trigger second. So you can use an alternate for that high F sharp, trigger first and second. It goes by so fast that the intonation is not going to be a big deal. So the last four notes in measure 9, E can be played trigger second, D can be trigger 1 and 2, E can be played trigger second, F sharp can be played trigger 1 and 2, and that way all they have to do is change valves. Sometimes it helps out to change valves instead of just having to live up there. You could do the alternate if it helps out, But that's if they're using regular fingerings on their G major scale, going up there and not having any issues, then don't even throw the alternate. But if they are having some issues with that, then that's something you can use not only there, but in the actual scale that they have to learn for their auditions as well. And as far as alternates are concerned, that's really the only thing we can do there. I'm going to do the same thing here. I'll break it down into different little sections. I'll play each section, talk about it, and then put them all together. We'll talk about the first 4 measures. Start off nice and strong. Big full sounds. Make sure you're very, very aware of the articulation. First measure, slur 2, tongue 2. Second measure, slur 3, tongue 1. Third measure, it alternates a little bit, so that's why I recommended slowing it down first and learning it that way. That way, not only yourself, but the students know exactly what's going on. Okay, the fermata at the end of measure 4. Hold on to it, big full sound, release, take a nice breath, and just come right back into measure 5 with the piano. There are some accidentals in measure 5. You have an A sharp, same thing as B flat, so trigger first. C sharp, trigger 2 and 3. D sharp, trigger first as well. Crescendo throughout measures 5, 6, arrive at measure 7, nice full sound. Maintain that sound all the way through measure 8. In measure 9, you can do this, it's a personal thing, but in measure 9, you can actually put a little bit of crescendo, start that off a little bit softer, crescendo up into measure 10. And I got that idea from measure 22. They start off the exact same. If you look at measure 22, there's a crescendo underneath measure 22 as well. It's the same idea. And in order to add just a little bit of variety to the first half of the music, you start there, maybe about a mezzo piano, mezzo forte, crescendo up to the forte, crescendo up to the G in measure 10, and then bring it back down to piano afterwards. Just add a little bit of a dynamic variety to the piece, because there's not really much happening there except for playing loud. And so I'll do that. I'll play from beginning to the downbeat of measure 10. Now from 10 to about 14, nice piano, nice and fluid, nice and smooth. None too harsh there. You want to keep it nice and pretty. Measure 13, like I said, that's where you have that errata. Make sure the first C you have is a C sharp, the 2 that follow are natural Cs. Measure 14, nice and strong. At the end of measure 15, you can probably put like a little bit of a decrescendo on that F sharp, leading into measure 16, because measure 16 you do have a mezzo forte. So instead of just honking away for a couple measures and then getting soft, you can set that up, decrescendo with 16 just a little bit, not too much. If you want to add a little bit more variety to this as well, you can play measure 12 into 13, about a mezzo piano, mezzo forte, a little bit stronger than what you did at 10, and that way 14 doesn't just stick out of nowhere at a forte compared to the 4 measures before. Okay, and so this is 10 through 16, or to the downbeat 16. Now these last 8 bars, 6 of them are very, very similar to each other. There's just a few things that separate them. For example, measures 16 and 19 have the same idea. You know, if you look at the first beat of measure 16 on the third beat, they're the exact same idea. G, F sharp, G, and that top note of D. That top note of D stays constant for that entire measure. Measure 19 has the same idea, except that the G happens on beat 2. Okay, so it kind of flip-flops, you know, those first 3 beats a little bit. Beat 4 is identical in both measures. So they can learn measure 16, they should be able to play measure 19 as well, and I would definitely point that out to them that way, and practice learning both of them at the exact same time. Okay, measure 17 and 20 are identical as far as note content and rhythm. The only thing that's different about it is the articulation. Is for measure 17, slur 3, tongue 1 on beats 1 and 3, as opposed to measure 20, slur 2, tongue 2. Okay, so that's an area where they could probably just not be thinking and just play both the same, and that would be wrong. Also, at the end of measure 20, there's a decrescendo to 21 as well. Okay, 18 and 21 are the exact same rhythmically and note-wise. One of them is just softer. Measure 21 is softer than 18, and then 22 start off soft, crescendo up into 23. Measure 22 is very similar to measure 9. Okay, so if they can play measure 9, they should be able to play measure 22 as well. It just ends a little bit differently chromatically down to the G arpeggio in measure 23. Okay, and nice and strong, measure 23. And don't rush going from the D, B, G. Pull that G, swing it out just a little bit, and end nice and pretty on that G. So this is measures 16 to 22.